Hong Kong has been on the boil for months now. Scenes of clashes and vandalism seem to have become the norm. The demonstrations were triggered by a controversial extradition bill that would have allowed suspects to be sent to mainland China for trial. That bill has been scrapped, but the protests, as you can see, continue. They have transformed into a border revolt against Beijing and are fast becoming the biggest political challenge for the Chinese president. The protesters in semi-autonomous Hong Kong have been seeking freedom. China has resorted to old tricks. It issued warnings through its army. It slapped cases on these people. It didn't work. Now the president himself has spoken, and this is what Xi Jinping has said. Let me quote. Any attempt to split China will end in crushed bodies and shattered bones, and any external forces backing such attempts to divide China will be deemed by the Chinese people as pipe dreaming. Very strong words there. This warning is a rare one. Xi Jinping has so far not made any such comment directly targeting the protesters in Hong Kong, and the tone and tenor of this warning tells you how riled up the Chinese leader is. It is also interesting how he hints at a foreign hand behind these protests. While people in Hong Kong have been accusing China of trying to influence the movement on the ground, China has also been accused of working behind the scenes to add shades of violence to this protest, which would then justify the use of force by the Hong Kong police. Hong Kong is a former British colony. It returned to Chinese rule under the one country, two systems formula in 1997, and now Beijing, which wants to control Hong Kong with an iron fist, seems to be losing its grip. China has always maintained that Hong Kong is a part of the country, and the fresh protests pose a direct threat to the authority of Xi Jinping. He is ready to convene a high-level Communist Party meeting later this month. Critics believe that the never-ending protests could lead to a more stringent response from Beijing. A military intervention could be the last resort. While such a response could be a show of China's might, it could have disastrous consequences for the Chinese president's image and also hamper any further attempts to assimilate Hong Kong into the mainland. Military intervention could also adversely impact the Hong Kong economy and its image of being the financial hub of Asia. There's a lot at stake here, clearly. Beijing has previously moved troops to the Hong Kong border as a military pledge that it would protect national sovereignty. For now, Hong Kong's leader, Carrie Lam, has failed to implement emergency laws to curb these violent protests. Hong Kong witnessed the 19th straight weekend of clashes between demonstrators and riot police. Protesters set ATM machines on fire. They vandalized stores. Activists dressed in black damaged shops and metro stations. They placed roadblocks across the city. Hong Kong police made a number of arrests. They resorted to using tear gas to contain the protesters, claiming they used, quote-unquote, minimum force. A few hundred people held peaceful protests in shopping malls and chanted slogans. Protesters also beat up a middle-aged woman after she was seen helping the police. They attacked the woman and smeared mud on her face. Beijing has so far said it believes Hong Kong's police force is capable of handling this, but protesters fear Beijing could send in troops to end the violence on the streets. Countries across the world are watching these protests closely and keeping a close eye on how China responds. Given the serious consequences, experts say that China would not be keen on repeating its 1989 crackdown on pro-democracy activists in Tiananmen Square.
I think what President Xi Jinping actually means is that if push comes to shove, the Chinese government will take a very hardline approach to these protests and that they would put them down with a lot of force. So I think that is what he means, and that is what the Chinese have done in the past. If you remember, the Tiananmen Square protests of 1989 were put down by an iron hand.